My name is Sophia Hartwell. I'm 32 years old, and for the past 8 months, I have been trying to understand how the man I built my entire life around could vanish without leaving a single word behind. Not a note, not a voicemail, not even a text. Just an empty closet, a cold side of the bed, and a manila envelope on the kitchen counter with my name written in his handwriting. Inside were divorce papers, already signed. My mother-in-law told me I should have seen it coming. She said a man like my husband was never built for a woman like me. She said it with such calm in her voice, like she had been rehearsing that sentence for years. Maybe she had. But before I tell you what I eventually found out and what it did to everything I thought I knew, I need you to understand who Daniel was to me. Because without that, none of what comes next will make any sense. Drop your country in the comments right now. I want to know where you're listening from. And if this story finds you at the right moment, stay until the end. Because the truth I uncovered didn't just change my marriage, it changed everything. People who know the Hartwell name know it from pharmacy shelves. My grandfather started the company in a small town in Ohio with one store and a borrowed delivery truck. By the time my father handed the keys to me at 29, Hartwell Pharma had over 300 locations across 18 states and a distribution network that reached every corner of the country. Newspapers called me a prodigy. Business journals called me relentless. My mother-in-law called me cold. She said it once, early on, at a Sunday dinner when she thought I'd stepped out of the room. She was wrong. I was standing just around the corner, holding a dish towel, listening to her tell her sister that her son had married a woman who cared more about profit margins than people. I never told Daniel what I heard. I didn't want to put him in the middle. That was my first mistake. Daniel Reyes was nothing like the men my family expected me to marry. He was a 4th-grade teacher at a public school 20 minutes from our house. He drove a 10-year-old car that made a noise he always said he would get fixed and never did. He coached soccer on weekends for kids who couldn't afford club fees. He remembered the names of every student he had ever taught, and he kept a box of their drawings in the hall closet that he refused to throw away. The first time I brought him to a Hartwell board dinner, he spent most of the evening talking to the catering staff and learning their names. My CFO pulled me aside afterward and said, with complete sincerity, that my boyfriend was a lovely man, but perhaps not the right image for the brand. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my drink. I married Daniel 14 months later. We had a son named Eli. He was 7 years old, sharp as anything, and completely devoted to his father. Every Saturday morning without fail, the two of them would make pancakes together and leave the kitchen in a state that I can only describe as a disaster zone. Daniel would look at the mess with complete pride and say, "That's what cooking looks like," and Eli would agree very seriously, as if they had just completed something historic. Those mornings were the best part of my week. But underneath all of it, there was a current of tension I had learned to navigate carefully. My mother-in-law, Patricia Reyes, had never accepted me. She loved Daniel with the fierce, consuming love of a woman who had raised a son alone after her husband left when Daniel was 9. He was her anchor, her center, the proof that she had done something right in a life full of difficulty. And when he chose me, a woman with money and ambition and a last name that carried weight, she treated it like a threat instead of a beginning. Every holiday visit had an undercurrent. Every compliment came wrapped in something that stung if you pressed on it too long. She told Daniel that rich women always leave eventually. She told him that Eli deserved a mother who was present. She told him, once, that a man who depends on his wife's money never really has a home of his own. Daniel always defended me. He would shut it down quietly, without drama, the way he handled most difficult things. But I could see it wearing on him over time. The tension of loving two women who could not find a single inch of common ground. I tried. I want to be honest about that. I tried for years. I brought her gifts she never used. I invited her to things she always had a reason to decline. I sat across from her at birthday dinners and searched for something we could talk about with genuine warmth, and I found very little. I told myself it was fine. I told myself that families were complicated and that what mattered was Daniel and Eli and the life we were building together. I told myself that right up until the morning I woke up and he was gone. It was a Tuesday in October. I had an early call scheduled with our East Coast distribution team. I reached for Daniel's side of the bed before I opened my eyes, the way I always did, and my hand found nothing but cold sheets. I assumed he had gotten up early. He sometimes did when he had lessons to prepare. I made coffee. I checked my phone. I started reviewing the notes for my morning call. Eli came downstairs at 7 and asked where Dad was. I told him Dad must have left early. Eli frowned the way he did when something didn't make sense to him and said that Dad's car was still in the driveway. I walked to the front window. He was right. That was when I noticed the envelope. It was sitting on the counter beside the fruit bowl, half hidden under a stack of mail I hadn't sorted yet. My name was written on the front in Daniel's handwriting, neat, even letters, the same handwriting I had seen on 7 years of birthday cards and grocery lists and little notes he would leave on my laptop when I worked too late. My hands went cold before I even opened it. The divorce papers were folded inside. Every line that needed a signature had been signed. His handwriting, his signature, dated the night before. I stood in my kitchen in my socks and read his name on those papers 4 times. 5 times. My brain kept trying to reroute, kept trying to find the explanation that made this make sense. Eli was eating cereal behind me. I could hear the spoon against the bowl. I made myself breathe normally. I made myself turn around and smile and tell him that everything was fine and that he should go get his backpack because the bus would be there soon. After he left, I called Daniel's phone. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. I sent 3 texts, no response. I called his school. They told me he had called in that morning and taken a personal day. He had planned this. The realization moved through me slowly, like cold water filling a room. I called his best friend Marcus. He hadn't heard from him. I called his colleague Diane, who sometimes met him for coffee before school. Nothing. I spent the rest of that morning calling everyone I could think of and hitting the same wall every time. By noon, my mother-in-law called me. I answered because I thought she might know something. I thought maybe Daniel had gone to her, had needed his mother, had needed somewhere to go while he figured out whatever was happening inside him. Instead, she said, very calmly, that she thought it was best if Eli stayed with her for a while during the transition. The transition. I asked her what she meant. She said that clearly things between Daniel and me had reached a breaking point, and that a child shouldn't be caught in the middle of that. I told her that I had no intention of sending my son anywhere. I told her that I didn't know where Daniel was and that I was trying to find him, and that whatever was happening, it did not involve Eli being removed from his home. She paused. Then she said, in that smooth and careful voice she always used when she wanted to sound reasonable, that sometimes love wasn't enough, and that Daniel deserved someone who could truly be a partner to him, not just a name on a company. I hung up. I hired a private investigator 3 weeks later. I want to make that clear because I know what it looks like, a woman with my resources waiting 3 weeks. The truth is, I spent those first weeks believing Daniel would come back. I believed there had been a breakdown, a crisis, something we could fix if he would just answer the phone. I didn't want to chase him. I wanted him to choose to come home. He didn't. So I hired the investigator. His name was Gerald, and he was thorough and expensive, and he found nothing useful for months. Daniel had not used his bank cards. His phone remained off. He had left behind his car, most of his clothes, and every photograph we had ever taken together. The only thing he took was a single framed drawing Eli had made for him when he was 4. A green house with a yellow sun and 2 stick figures holding hands. Eli had signed it in purple crayon. That detail broke something in me that I didn't know how to repair. Months passed. Eli asked about his father every week, and every week I told him the truth in the safest way I knew how to tell it, that Dad was going through something hard and that we both loved him and that I was doing everything I could. Eli would nod very seriously, the way he always did when he was storing something away to think about later, and then he would go back to whatever he had been doing. My mother-in-law continued to call occasionally, always with that smooth tone, always with some version of the same message. Let go, move on. Sign the papers. Daniel had made his decision, and I should respect it. I never signed them. People told me I was making things harder for myself. My own CFO gently suggested that I consider the optics of a prolonged and unresolved separation for someone in my position. My assistant left a pamphlet from a therapist on my desk without saying a word about it. I kept working. I kept looking. I kept Eli's routine as steady as I could. And then, on a Wednesday morning in early June, 8 months after Daniel disappeared, I drove out to inspect our newest distribution hub. It was a facility on the edge of the city. A major expansion I had been overseeing for 2 years, one of the largest capital investments Hartwell had made in a decade. The project manager had requested a walkthrough before we brought in the final equipment. I arrived in a gray blazer and flat shoes because I knew I would be walking the floor. I had my coffee in one hand and my phone in the other, and I was already half thinking about the afternoon call I had scheduled with our legal team. The facility was enormous. Hundreds of workers moving through organized rows of shelving and conveyor systems, forklifts in motion. The sound of industry, of something large and functional and alive. I was walking the east corridor with the project manager when I saw him. He was about 40 feet away, pushing a cart loaded with inventory boxes, wearing a Hartwell Logistics uniform. A blue shirt with the company logo on the chest. His head was down, his hair was shorter than I remembered. He had lost weight. I stopped walking. The project manager said something I didn't hear. My coffee cup slipped in my hand, and I grabbed it without looking at it. I couldn't look away from the man in the blue shirt. He turned slightly to navigate around another cart, and I saw his face. Daniel. My husband was 30 feet away from me, wearing the uniform of my company, delivering packages inside a Hartwell facility, and he had no idea I was there. For a moment, I genuinely could not move. My body had received the information but had not yet decided what to do with it. The project manager said my name, and I held up one hand to stop him without turning around. Daniel had almost passed out of view when I started walking. I moved fast. My flat shoes were quiet on the concrete floor. I came around the edge of a shelving unit, and he was there, 3 feet away, checking something on the tablet attached to his cart. He looked up. The moment our eyes met, the color left his face completely. He took one step back. The tablet slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Neither of us moved to pick it up. 8 months. 8 months of empty phone calls and unanswered texts, and a son who cried quietly in his room some nights thinking I couldn't hear him. 8 months of signing nothing because I refused to believe this was real. I felt the anger come up so fast it frightened me. "You have been here," I said. My voice came out lower and steadier than I expected. "You have been working. In my building. In my company's uniform." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. "You need to tell me right now," I said. "And I mean everything." Workers nearby had gone quiet. A forklift somewhere behind me had stopped moving. I was aware of being watched, but I could not have cared less. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Then he bent down, picked up the tablet, set it carefully on the cart, and said, "Not here." "Here," I said. He studied my face. He must have understood that I had not driven 40 minutes and walked half a mile of warehouse floor to be redirected. He exhaled slowly. "My mother came to see me," he said. "About a week before I left. I felt the air shift between us. She didn't come alone," he continued. "She brought someone with her. A man I had never met. She introduced him as a consultant she had hired." I stared at him. "She showed me documents," Daniel said. "Photographs, financial records." "What kind of documents?" He looked at the floor for a moment, then back at me. "She told me you had been planning to restructure the company, that your board had been advising you to separate your personal assets. She said the next step was ending the marriage to protect your estate from any future liability tied to me." "That's not true," I said immediately. "None of that is true." "I know that now," he said quietly. "I didn't know it then." "What else?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "She told me that if I didn't leave on my own terms, the board would push for a formal separation anyway, and that the process would be used to scrutinize my finances, my background, my family." I felt cold. She said they would audit the years before we married. She said they would find discrepancies. He stopped. What discrepancies? There are no discrepancies. I know, he said. But she told me they would manufacture them if they had to. She said her consultant had experience with that kind of thing. She said I would lose my teaching license. She said. He stopped again. Tell me, I said. He looked directly at me. She said if I fought it and things became public, the stress would affect Eli. She said a long legal battle could take years, and that Eli would grow up watching his parents destroy each other in court. She said the kindest thing I could do for our son was to leave quietly so that you could move on and give him a stable home. The warehouse around me had gone completely silent. My mother-in-law had stood in front of my husband and told him that loving us was hurting us. She had dressed it up in documents and consultants and the language of protection, and she had handed him a way out that looked like sacrifice. And he had believed her. Because he loved Eli more than he feared anything else, and because the part of him that had always felt like he didn't quite belong in my world had been waiting for something like this to confirm what he already feared was true. So you just left, I said. You signed the papers and you disappeared and you let me spend 8 months thinking you stopped wanting us. His jaw tightened. I thought I was protecting you. You let Eli go 8 months without his father. Something passed across his face that I had no word for. Where have you been staying? I asked. A friend from my second year of teaching, he said. Someone she didn't know. I applied for the logistics position here under my middle name on the application. He paused. I didn't know it was your facility until the second week. You stayed anyway. He looked at me. I needed to know you were still okay. This was the closest I could get. I stood there with 8 months of exhaustion and grief and a specific, incandescent rage sitting in my chest, and I looked at my husband in his blue uniform in the middle of my warehouse, and I thought about what it must have taken for a proud man to do all of this. To shrink himself this far because a woman had convinced him that shrinking was the same as love. Go get your things from wherever you have been staying, I said. He blinked. You're coming home tonight. We have a son who misses his father. And then you and I are going to sit down, and you are going to tell me everything she said, every word, every name, and I am going to deal with this the way it deserves to be dealt with. Daniel stared at me. Clara. Sophia, I said. He almost smiled. It was the first almost smile I had seen from him in 8 months, and it landed somewhere in the center of my chest. She's not going to get away with this, I said. She's my mother, he said quietly. I know, I said. And what she did was still wrong. I called my lawyer from the car on the way back to the office. Gerald, my investigator, received a new set of instructions by the end of the day. Within 72 hours, I had a clearer picture than I wanted of what had actually happened, and it was worse in some ways than what Daniel had described. Patricia had hired the consultant 6 months before Daniel left. She had been building the case against me for half a year, constructing a version of events carefully enough that it would hold together under pressure. The documents she showed Daniel contained real data pulled from public filings, rearranged and reframed to tell a story that wasn't true. The photographs were real too, taken without context, made to look like something they weren't. She had planned this the way someone plans something they've been thinking about for a long time. The following month, Hartwell Pharma held its annual board dinner. It was a formal event at a hotel downtown, the kind of gathering where the company's major stakeholders came together to hear about the year's performance and the direction ahead. Patricia attended every year as Daniel's mother. I had never removed her from the guest list, even during the separation, because I had not wanted to use the company as a weapon in what felt like a personal war. That year, she arrived in a dark blue dress with her hair done, smiling at people she recognized, playing the role she always played at these events, the humble, gracious mother of the CEO's husband. Former husband, she had been telling people. The separation had been mutual. These things happened. I watched her work the room from across the event space for 20 minutes before I walked over. She saw me coming. To her credit, she didn't flinch. Sophia, she said warmly. I'm glad you're doing well. I hope Eli. I need a moment, I said. She smiled at the couple beside her and excused herself with the practiced ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times. We stepped to a quieter corner near the window. You hired a consultant to fabricate evidence, I said. You showed my husband forged documents and told him that leaving was the only way to protect his son. You convinced a good man to abandon his family by weaponizing his love for his child. Her expression didn't change right away. That was the most disturbing part. She maintained the smile for a second too long. Then she said, very quietly, Daniel was never going to be enough for where your life was headed. I did what I had to do. I looked at her. You did what you wanted to do, I said. You told yourself it was for him, but it was for you. Because you couldn't stand losing him to me. Her jaw tightened. You don't know what it cost me to watch my son. I am going to stop you, I said. Because this is not a conversation. I am telling you what I know. I am telling you that my legal team has documentation of what your consultant was hired to do. I am telling you that Daniel has provided a full account. I am telling you that what you did has a name, and that name is fraud. Her face went pale. Around us, the dinner was continuing. People were talking, glasses were clinking, someone was laughing at something near the bar. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary evening, running right alongside this. I have two options, I said. I can pursue this through every legal channel available to me. Or you can remove yourself from Daniel's life, not because I am forcing you, but because you owe him the dignity of living without the weight of what you did to him. You choose. She stared at me. She looked, for the first time since I had known her, genuinely uncertain. He'll never forgive you for this, she said. Making me choose. He doesn't know I'm having this conversation, I said. And I'm not making you choose anything. I'm telling you what I know, and I am telling you what comes next if you decide to test me. I walked back to the center of the room before she could respond. The board dinner continued. I gave my remarks. I thanked the team. I talked about the year ahead and the investments we were making in people and infrastructure and long-term growth. Patricia left before dessert was served. Daniel was home when I got back that night. He was on the couch with Eli, both of them asleep. The television still going with some animated movie Eli had definitely been awake for at the start and had not finished. Daniel had one arm around Eli and his head tipped slightly to the side. I stood in the doorway for a minute and looked at the two of them. I thought about all the nights Eli had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for his dad to come home, not understanding why home kept being empty. I thought about all the Saturday mornings without pancakes and the soccer practices where I sat on the sideline alone, and the way Eli had stopped asking questions out loud even though I could see them collecting behind his eyes. I turned off the television. I put a blanket over both of them. I sat in the chair across the room in the quiet. We had a long road ahead. I wasn't pretending otherwise. Trust that has been broken doesn't heal on a schedule, and Daniel and I had spent 8 months on opposite sides of a wall that someone else had built between us. That wall would take time to come down. There would be hard conversations. There would be nights when the weight of all of it sat heavy in the room between us. But he was home, and in the morning there would be pancakes. 3 months later, Daniel went back to teaching. His school welcomed him without question. He had more goodwill stored up there than he probably realized. Eli's soccer season started, and Daniel coached again, and I came to every single game and sat on the sideline with a travel mug of coffee and cheered too loudly and didn't care even a little. I did not pursue legal action against Patricia. That was my decision, made clearly and for my own reasons, and I don't need everyone to agree with it. What I needed was for it to be over. What I needed was to stop spending energy on the woman who had tried to hollow out my family and to spend it instead on rebuilding what she hadn't managed to destroy. She has not contacted Daniel since the board dinner. I don't know what she makes of any of it. I don't think about it very often anymore. What I think about is this. My mother-in-law looked at my husband and saw weakness because he drove an old car and taught children and didn't have a powerful last name. She thought that meant he was less than. She thought that meant he was temporary. She thought that a woman with my life would eventually agree with her assessment and discard him accordingly. She was wrong about all of it. The man she called insufficient spent 8 months living smaller than he'd ever lived, working under a borrowed name in a building he had no claim to, because he thought that was the only way to protect the people he loved. He didn't ask for credit. He didn't leave a trail for anyone to find. He just quietly absorbed the cost of a lie someone else told him, and he carried it, alone, for 8 months, without breaking. That is not weakness. I know what weakness looks like. I have sat across from it in boardrooms and negotiating tables my entire career. Weakness is when someone can only feel tall by making others feel small. Weakness is building a case against your own son's happiness because you are too afraid of losing him to let him be loved. What Daniel did was not weakness. It was the most difficult kind of love there is, the kind that doesn't ask to be seen. And if you are listening to this and you have someone in your life who loves you like that, quietly, steadily, without a spotlight, I hope you see them. I hope you choose them. I did. And I would do it again 1,000 times over.